that's too obvious. So I'm thinking about it now. First number that comes into your head, make a mental note of it. Okay. Now obviously some of you would get it right just by chance. I reckon there's about 40, 50 people in here. So if we only get about 5 hits, well that's just chance. So let's see if we can do better than that. Can you just put your hand up if you thought of the number 7? Oh, that's considerably more than... Yeah, that's pretty good actually. You're not a bad audience, you're quite psychic. Let's try another one. This time a bit more complicated. It's a 2-digit number. It's between 1 and 50. 2 odd digits and they're not the same. So it could be the number 15, 1 and 5, both odd digits, not the same. It couldn't be the number 11, both odd digits, but they are the same. So the first number that comes into your head that fits that description, less than 50, 2 odd digits, not the same. Okay? How many of you thought of the number 37? That's not bad. Did anybody think of 35? I'm sorry, I thought of 35 first and then changed my mind. That's my fault, I confused you, I do apologise. Now, okay. Is that any kind of evidence for telepathy? Of course it's not. What it actually is, technically, is something called population stereotypes. There are lots of situations where we feel as if we're making a free choice out of a number of different response options, and therefore our intuitions tell us that the response probabilities, frequency of the responses ought to be more or less evenly distributed across those different options. And the fact is they just aren't. They cluster in very predictable ways. So typically you'll find about 1/3 of your audience will go for the number 7. Typically you'll find about 1/3 of the audience will go for the number 37 in the second example. And then about another 1/4 will go for the number 35. So add those together, you've got over half the audience there. So this is obviously something you could exploit if you wanted to make it look like you had psychic powers, when in fact you don't. It's a simple example, something that might look to some people as if it's psychic, but it isn't. We don't really know why it works, but we know that very reliably it does work. A certain Israeli psychic, who's very fond of suing people, used to appear on TV a lot, and he would say, I'm visualising a simple line drawing and I'm sending it to the viewers now, and I want them to write it down, send it into the TV station. And what did he tend to draw? Any offers? What would you have drawn? A house. Yeah, about 10% of the audience would go for a house. And if you've got millions of viewers, then 10% of millions of viewers is a hell of a lot of little houses that people were drawing and sending into the TV station. But it didn't matter what Yuri was actually thinking, he would have got about 10% of the viewers drawing a little house anyway. Now, of course, you can exploit this in pretending you're a fake psychic, or even in magic tricks. So we'll try one last little demonstration here. You try and be really tricksy this time. I want you to look at these cards. You can change your mind, you can switch about, but then I want you to choose one and now just concentrate on it, okay? And keep concentrating on that card. Now here's the magic bit. I'm going to take one of those cards away, and with any luck, if I can get this thing to work, which I can't, and with any luck, your card is now gone. You just put your hand up if your card is now gone. I see. What an incredibly predictable crowd you are. Now in actual fact, maybe not so obviously, that trick is not based on population stereotypes. It's based on a completely different principle altogether. And there is a little lesson in that as well, insofar as there are certain conjurers and mentalists who sometimes say that they're telling you how they've done a trick, and actually what they're telling you is what we psychologists call a load of old bollocks. And the name Darren Brown just came in. Anyway, okay, so let's go on with the actual presentation. We've seen the population stereotypes demonstration. To start off with introduction and a few definitions, talk briefly about levels of paranormal belief in Western societies around the world, give you a few examples of cognitive biases that might actually explain why people sometimes think that something psychic's happened when maybe it hasn't, talk about the psychology of alien abduction claims, because I just find them fascinating, and finish with a little demonstration which, if you've not seen it before, I know some of you have, so forgive me, but if you've not seen it before, it's a very, very, very dramatic and memorable demonstration that you can even try on your friends at home. Right, What do we mean by paranormal then? Now, parapsychologists have quite a strict definition of what they mean by paranormal. They restrict their subject matter to the study of three different things: extrasensory perception, ESP, psychokinesis, PK, and evidence relating to life after death. And that's it. They don't include in things that the tabloid press and anomalistic psychologists often do, things like UFO abduction claims, or astrology, or the Bermuda Triangle, or all sorts of other stuff that, basically is anything that's kind of weird and wonderful. Now, I think there's a good reason why anomalistic psychologists might have that kind of broader definition. If you go to see a medium and you have a reading, then what actually happens is you're told things about your life, about your future, about your past, about issues that are on your mind, and allegedly this is coming from the spirit of a dead person. Therefore, it fits this strict definition. If you go for a reading with an astrologer or a tarot card reader, you get pretty much the same kind of information, but it wouldn't fit this strict definition. I would argue that the underlying psychology of what's going on is the same, and therefore it makes sense for anomalistic psychologists to kind of cast that wider net. Today, what those things are: extrasensory perception can be defined as the knowledge of or response to an external event or influence, not apprehended through known sensory channels. It comes in three different flavours. You've got telepathy, which is what I pretended to demonstrate at the beginning of the talk, alleged direct mind-to-mind contact. You've got clairvoyance, awareness of remote objects or events. Typical examples would be psychic detectives who claim that they can tell you where the missing body will be found or who did the murder. And you've got precognition, knowledge of events before they occur, other than as a result of inference. So knowing that, or rather predicting that England will not win the World Cup is not precognition. Okay? If, however, you say went to bed tonight and you had a dream about something extremely unlikely happening, like this conference room being hit by a meteorite, huge meteorite destroyed, then that might be an example of precognition. If it does happen, will you all vouch for the fact that you actually saw me do it? In fact, it's been filmed, isn't it, when I said it? Okay. That's the sensory side of the paranormal. The motor side of the paranormal is psychokinesis. The influence of mind on external objects or processes without the mediation of known physical energies or forces. Examples would be if I claimed I could make this glass of water just rise from the table just by thinking about it rather than using my hands. If I were to claim I could cure people by passing my hands over their body, I could kind of use some kind of psychic healing. That would be another example of psychokinesis. Or if I claimed that just by gently stroking metal objects I could make them bend, that would be an example of psychokinesis. I don't know if you spotted the story in the paper today that apparently Uri Geller scratched his neck and his head fell off. That's the clean version of that joke. I'm not going to say what the other one is, we don't know. Right. Okay, so that's parapsychology, that's the paranormal. So what is anomalistic psychology? This is the rather wordy definition we have on our unit's website. Anomalistic psychology may be defined as the study of extraordinary phenomena of behaviour and experience, including, but not restricted to, those which are often labelled paranormal. It's directed towards understanding bizarre experiences that many people have without assuming a priori that there is anything paranormal involved. It entails attempting to explain paranormal and related beliefs and ostensibly paranormal experiences in terms of known or knowable psychological and physical factors. And the first question that often arises at this point is, why bother? And again, I personally, obviously, I'm a huge champion of anomalistic psychology. I'm aware of the fact that a lot of my colleagues think, why are you wasting your time on that stuff? You know, clearly it's all nonsense. Why are you interested in it? Well, I think there's some very good reasons to be very interested in it. The most obvious is that so many people believe in this stuff. So if we look at opinion poll data from America, a representative sample of American adults, 1 in every 4 Americans believes in ghosts. 1 in every 4 Americans believe they've had a telepathic experience. 1 in 6 Americans have felt that they've been in touch with someone who had died. 1 in 10 claim to have seen or been in the presence of a ghost. More than half believe in the devil, and 1 in 10 claim to have talked to the devil. 1 in 7 say they've personally seen a UFO. And 3 in 4 read their horoscopes in the newspaper, and 1 in 4 say they believe in astrology. So clearly, in the American public, astrology is real. A sizable proportion of those people. Now, you might think, oh, that's just crazy Americans. But no. Now, I don't normally believe what I read in the Daily Mail, let me make that absolutely clear. But this was a properly conducted opinion poll, representative sample of British adults. 64% believe that some people have powers that cannot be explained by science. The figures in square brackets give you the percentage that say they have had direct personal experience of whatever the item's about. That's 1% more than believe in God. About half believe in life after death. About half believe in ghosts, about half believe in precognitive dreams, about half believe in heaven, but interestingly only 28% believe in hell, about half believe in thought reading, 41% in communication with the dead, about a third believe in psychokinesis, and about a quarter believe in angels and reincarnation. I actually did join the Reincarnation Society last week. It was actually £500. I thought, well, you only live once. Thank you. Universality, right. Obviously, the point is, it's not just our society or modern Western societies where you find these high levels of belief and reports of ostensibly paranormal experiences. Every single society that's ever existed anywhere on the planet. So there is this kind of universality at the societal level, at least, and not the individual level. And that can only mean for me one of two things. Either paranormal forces really do exist, and if they do, then scientists ought to just accept that, get on with studying them, try to understand them the way they try to understand everything else about the natural world. Or the alternative is that paranormal forces don't exist, and that people are misinterpreting certain kinds of situations and experiences and events in terms of thinking they must require a paranormal explanation. If that's the case, then we can learn an awful lot about human psychology in general by studying these ostensibly paranormal experiences. In just the same way we learn an awful lot about vision by studying visual illusions. When the visual system goes wrong, that actually gives us some real insights into what's going on during normal everyday visual perception. One approach that's very commonly taken is to look at various cognitive biases that might underlie these kinds of experiences and might offer explanations. I mean, our cognitive system, the way we process information is absolutely stunning, it's amazing. There's all kinds of things we do every second of the day that you just take for granted that is actually, pretty close to miraculous, as close to miraculous as an atheist can get. The fact now that I'm standing here talking, I've got what, for me at least, are some kind of fairly abstract ideas in my head that I'm trying to communicate, and that involves me formulating those ideas, that generating some kind of pattern of activity in my brain that makes my vocal cords vibrate in a particular way, that makes the air molecules between you and me vibrate, that makes your eardrums vibrate, that sends neural impulses into your auditory cortex, and then through an elaborate chain, hopefully you end up understanding what I'm saying. I think I may have lost you in that. But you get the point. I mean, we don't know how that's done. We don't understand consciousness. It's incredible. But for all that, we do know that the cognitive system can lead us astray as well. There are certain systematic biases that can come into play in certain situations. And some of these might be relevant to explaining why we sometimes draw faulty conclusions and we might think something's paranormal when maybe it's not. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of this. Firstly, this is from an experiment carried out by a friend of mine, Peter Brugger, and his colleagues. They asked people to answer the question, which is more likely? If you imagine yourself throwing 10 dice at the same time and getting 10 sixes, or throwing one die 10 times in succession and getting 10 sixes. Now, I'll come back to why they asked that in a second. Well, I'll tell you why they asked it and then go back to the actual problem. They were asking this question because they thought that something called the illusion of control might be relevant to explaining some aspects of paranormal belief. The illusion of control was first studied by Ellen Langer back in the 1970s,